If we're not taking these risks, how do we know that we're ever going to be successful? Leaders most definitely need to embrace digital technology and AI. If you are not doing this today, you will be left behind as a leader.
Leaders really need to get in the trenches, but also know when to step back.
I make a conscious effort on a quarterly basis. I'm out there on the front line. I'm getting into the trenches. I'm listening and understanding. They are the closest individuals to our customers.
Welcome back to CEO Behind the Scenes. I'm Lara Nersessian, your brand new host. I'm a psychology and mindset expert, former executive, keynote speaker, and of course, podcast host. I so cannot wait to introduce you to today's guest, as so many organizations talk about innovation and transformation, but this is the real deal. Michelle Aquilina is the CEO of MoleMap, a company specializing in early cancer detection. Under Michelle's leadership, MoleMap has shifted from being in financial strain to becoming a global player in skin cancer detection. By combining clinical expertise with proprietary technology and AI, Michelle is redefining what's possible in patient care and setting a new benchmark for leaders across the healthcare industry. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. And as I was doing my research for this particular episode, one thing really struck me about your journey, and that has been your ability to lead a business through a major turnaround. When you took on this position, the business was in financial strain, and you've been able to turn that around into a position of real innovation and success. I'm curious to know if you could tell us a little bit about that journey and what that transition has really been like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came into MoleMap, it was an organization that lacked identity. It didn't understand who it was. Was it a technology player? Was it a healthcare provider? Was it a retail provider? And that really led to confusion within the organization. It also lacked decisiveness and really clear decision making, and there wasn't a lot of responsibility within the organization. When I was approached to lead this amazing business, I looked at this MoleMap model and thought to myself, my goodness, this is a business model that organizations in healthcare have been trying to re-engineer, but have never been successful because of the existing models that have been so complex and entrenched. So I saw the opportunities within MoleMap. Now, when I came in, what was really evident was that the people in this organization, the frontline workers, had a very clear purpose, and that was they genuinely believed that they wanted to save lives through early detection of melanoma and skin cancer. And that flame still flickered. So what was really evident was that whilst purpose is such a strong component within any organizational success, it's not the only component that will succeed a business. So I quickly embarked on a very complex, multiple strategic turnaround plan, and it was extremely fast because it needed to be fast, but equally it was about engaging the front lines, engaging our support office workers, listening to their needs and wants, and understanding the true core of what this business was, but also eliminating a lot of the inefficiencies and the not so focused areas of the organization. So once we identified and had a very clear identity, we were a healthcare provider with this added benefit of being technology enabled. And that was such a key asset and defining moment to when now starting to build the foundations from success. It required breaking down those foundations and rebuilding them. It required a 3-year strategy with a very clear purpose and focused on 3 core elements, not 50 core elements.
I love hearing that so much because I feel like a big piece around business success and what we hear about is that purpose piece and being purpose-led. And I think what's really interesting in hearing your story is that it's not just about the purpose, it's also about the models, the systems, the structure, the intentionality behind everything that you're doing to get that energy and focus really concerted towards that end goal. And one of the things that I really picked up on in what you said was that focus on the model. And MoleMap has a very unique model, blending all different types of healthcare, AI, technology, as you touched on. What do you believe makes that so unique in terms of MoleMap's approach to those various practices and systems?
First and foremost, it's about leading from the front and inspiring others and having that passion and that energy that people can really lead and follow. And one thing that once we established who we were and I got the right people in those roles, they were on this same journey as me. I'm a big believer in being elevated by a high-performing team and a team around me, and that includes anyone from the front line right up to the top echelons. Being an integrated model of care was something very unique that I knew I needed to draw upon. It was, when I say integration, it was first and foremost a nurse-led model of care that performed diagnostics we were opening up access barriers to individuals who typically would wait 8 months for a dermatologist appointment or weeks to get into the GP. We were a model of care that opened those access barriers. We had professionals assessing skin diagnostics. In addition to that, we leveraged from our dermatologist specialists who are diagnosing from anywhere across Australia. And that was our tech enablement that was fully integrated into the clinical workflows. And then, of course, Kahu AI, which has been a huge success story for MoleMap. Our AI journey started in 2015. It wasn't something that was a buzzword during the COVID pandemic. However, what was very evident was our original founder, had developed this algorithm. MoleMap has the largest database globally and had been able to engage with third-party partners to build this algorithm, but no one put it to use. And it was sitting, let's just call it a broom closet, for many, many years until I had come along and went, whoa, this is the golden nugget that MoleMap has been waiting for and that can seriously elevate early skin cancer detection. And it required bravery and courage. It required a lot of thoughtful thinking around how do we execute an already sound, entrenched business model that is unique in its own right. It is addressing a healthcare issue of GP and dermatology shortages and has the ability to provide access to everybody within the communities across Australia and New Zealand. And I first needed to gather an AI governance committee that was going to help me shape what Kahu AI would be. And they still are here today, independent bodies, AI experts, a group of dermatologists. We have GPs, we have registered nurses, and we have an executive team. And we are constantly challenging the status quo with Kahu AI. It does give us a 95% accuracy rate and sensitivity, which means that there's always a degree of variability. And we've had it in play now in New Zealand for 2 years. And what we have identified is that we're continuously evolving with the AI. So we know that the AI is not a good reader over tattoos or within hair. So this is why I strongly believe that the world of AI will never take over the human element of healthcare. And it can't, because there's always a degree of variability. We have lots of technology that's out there that is automation and AI generative, but yet you always still need the human element to give that second, third set of eyes, and then that final confirmation of whether it is going to be a cancer or not. We conducted research across Australia and New Zealand and gathered a significant sample set. What we found was that our community loved the thought of AI, but they still don't trust it. So that enabled us to really provide a very soft, gentle launch into our clinical workflow. So we quickly identified that our clinicians, our registered nurses and our dermatologists will continue to play a very vital role within skin cancer diagnostics and lesion mapping and diagnosis. And we will utilise Kahu AI as that second set of eyes that's going to help provide the accuracy and determine whether this is a cancerous lesion or not, so then we can expedite that treatment.
What is so fascinating about that is that AI has become such a divisive point of conversation for a lot of businesses. I feel like there's a lot of organizations that are very forward thinking when it comes to AI and very early adopters and very much see the power and benefit of utilizing it within their businesses. And then there's other businesses that still feel very reluctant, potentially because of that human element that you touched on earlier. But I'm curious to know, when you did join the organization all those years ago, you mentioned something which was you saw that was the golden nugget. How did you know that was the golden nugget?
Yeah.
What was it that helped you to see that and identify it for what it was?
Being a very involved CEO and really staying in touch with the healthcare industry in general. As I say, I get right into the front lines to understand and listen to the people who open our doors every day and deliver our clinical services. And also having this intuition and understanding, being in healthcare for over 30 years, you have this natural instinct to understand, well, what are the next stages of healthcare and how can we certainly improve the lives of Australians and Kiwis? And it was something that comes with a lot of courage, and I needed to be really bold and back myself, because this was something big. It was something that, it was sitting in a closet. The courageousness and the boldness just wasn't there with my predecessors, and there was a reason for that. So I had to really dig deep to understand why we had this amazing AI piece of technology, but it wasn't in use. Once I identified that it was a ready-to-go piece and we had still a little bit more work to do, we embarked on some clinical trials to really validate our evidence-based Kahu AI. When I was comfortable with that and established our clinical governance committee, it was, okay, Michelle, you're now ready to go. I always have a philosophy: if I'm not feeling a bit nervous, then I'm not doing enough. And that, within a dynamic environment that we're in today, is, in my opinion, never enough. You need to continuously be pushing those boundaries and obviously understanding that the fourth industrial revolution is here. It's evident that a lot of organizations and CEOs aren't really grappling and ready with it, including myself. I attended a lot of AI summits and a lot of learning, and I immersed myself in the AI technology because I wanted to know how this is going to benefit our organization and for the broader community. And once I established that and understood that, it's like, okay, Michelle, you're not going to be able to solve this within 6 months. You can solve it within 12 months. And guess what? You're going to have to continuously evolve the AI to avoid the AI drift and ensure that the AI continuously remains relevant. And that's why I've invested within my first head of AI. I recruited him recently, and that really is a testament to my commitment in the way that I see automation and AI, agentic AI solutions within back-end functions, but also from a front-end point of view. We're not done yet with Kahu AI. Kahu AI will eventually be able to identify lesions at its earliest stage to then determine whether that lesion will become cancerous or not.
It takes a lot of audacity and boldness to be able to see things and drive innovation in a way that hasn't been done before. I'm wondering, where did that courage or that bravery to be willing to put these things to the front line, where do you feel like that came from? Is that something that was always innately there, or do you feel like that's almost a skill that you've cultivated as a leader over time?
It most definitely is a skill that I've cultivated over time. My background is I'm an operations expert. I am not a linear thinker. I think very broadly, and I have this ability to connect the dots. And when I talk about the conductor and the conductor leading the orchestra, that is where I have an understanding of interconnectivity and how that really emphasizes and focuses on the customer. So it is a combination of both. It's a combination of really understanding the ground roots and the ecosystem of the organisation, as well as the healthcare industry in general, as well as the gaps. It's the forces that are contributing to this decision making. That, combined with some intuition some due diligence in the background, validating the thought process and the innovative ideas that come through, and then having the courage and the boldness to be able to move forward. I think as a CEO in any organization, in particular for me, if I'm not pushing those boundaries and not moving forward, then my fear is that our organization will become redundant, because there are many organizations out there that are thinking that thought process, potentially maybe not actioning it, turning from words to action, but it is a combination of a skill that's been acquired, a level of resilience and understanding and maturity, but also the intuition side of things and that understanding of just going with it, Michelle. And if it doesn't work, then we will deal with it and we will understand why. But if we're not taking these risks, how do we know that we're ever going to be successful?
This brings me to something that I read around your story, which was you received a piece of feedback early on in your career. Michelle, you are too operational. And when I read that, it really brought me to all the times in my career, especially early parts of my career, climbing the corporate ladder, pouring so much energy into wanting to do the best, and then only to be told that you're either too much or not enough of something. And what did that moment feel like for you when you were told you're too operational? And how do you feel like that has been transcended into you becoming the type of leader that you are today?
Yeah. Firstly, I really want to thank that person who said that to me. At first, I was completely offended because I thought, wow, operational experts are not linear thinkers. They think very broadly and wear a multitude of hats. They're the operational experts. They're the financial experts. They're the HR experts. They're the marketing experts. They're the IT experts. So I was really taken aback when that was said to me. However, when I asked that person, could you please put that into context, that person couldn't give me context that sat behind that. So I walked away and really reflected on that conversation. I said to myself, Michelle, you're not showing them what you are capable of doing. So show them. And that's exactly what I did.
I think there's something about being underestimated
yes.
and then transcending that into just power and going for it in the way that you did.
Absolutely.
And we here at CEO Behind the Scenes, we have a lot of CEOs, managing directors, leaders, entrepreneurs in the audience. For someone who feels like the odds are stacked against them, or they've been told they're too much, they're not enough, they may feel like they don't have what it takes, what would be your advice to those types of leaders that could be listening to this episode?
Yeah. Look, I really feel that it's very easy to label individuals when they really don't understand the individual in depth. My advice would be to really articulate and find the balance. So for me, many years ago when this individual told me that I was too operational, I clearly wasn't articulating the strategic side and capabilities that I had to execute. So not only was I driving growth and leading a team and leading people, but I also had the operational effectiveness side of me, which gave me that strength. And I really encourage people that don't just think in one lane. So if you are having these conversations and you are trying to get your messaging across, think more broadly and really break down those key elements that your area of expertise is at.
When you took on this position, you were poached to take on the role of CEO for an ASX-listed company. And it feels as though that it was even bigger of a challenge than what you had initially expected or anticipated. Tell me, how did you find that inner resilience or grit to not just take on the role, but to have the tenacity to stay with it even through the more challenging periods?
That was a defining moment in my career. And yes, I was approached to take on this role. And obviously when I got in there and lifted the covers, it was in dire straits and the business was in trouble, not only from a financial perspective, but also from a people point of view. Now, I could have easily have walked away. I could have easily have said, I'm going to take the easy road out and see you later. I was getting calls all the time for new roles. But I sat back and reflected, and it does come back to my humble roots of being there on the front line and the trenches and understanding the clinicians and understanding the patients and understanding the frontline workers. And I couldn't leave them. So it was, Michelle, you are going to turn this business around and you are going to find that grit and determination, that strategic element that you are known for and the operational expertise, and you will bring this business to be in the top 3. And I crossed that line. I physically saw my line. I crossed that line. And the minute I crossed that line, there was no turning back. And it was blood, sweat and tears, sleepless nights. It was leveraging from stakeholders and individuals. It was really showing the board what this business was capable of doing. It was engaging with practitioners. It was engaging with frontline workers. And I was proud to say that it was the top 3rd healthcare organisation for that particular industry across Australia. And they still talk about that legacy today, which is extremely rewarding.
Yes, absolutely. It's such an incredible story when you're able to turn a business around. You almost become a proof of concept to show other organizations, other leaders what is possible in that bravery and that courageous leadership that we've spoken about in this episode.
Yeah, I have been known to be a turnaround expert, but what people don't really talk about is the Michelle Aquilina that can sustain that growth and continue to sustain that growth quite rapidly. So it's really important to know that transformation is one thing, but you need to really entrench and entwine that culture of growth within the organisation to ensure that it's sustained. And that is something that I know that I'm good at and I'm an expert at, but people don't often talk about the sustained side and the growth side. They often talk about the transformation side because that is the most exciting part of an organisation and the success story. The success story is actually right from beginning to the end, and of course it never ends. It continues.
Absolutely. I think there's something so key around building for longevity and long-term success. And I think maybe it's not as exciting to talk about that as it is to talk about the turnaround story, but I think it's just a testament of that is one piece of the story.
Yes.
And then what's next?
It absolutely is.
Yeah. I did want to come back to the piece around AI and how this is really shifting MoleMap, but also the broader industry as well, from a leadership perspective and from what you're observing in the industry. What do you believe are some of those key shifts that other leaders should be aware of right now?
Yeah. Leaders most definitely need to embrace digital technology and AI. If you are not doing this today or within the short term, you will be left behind as a leader. In my case, I have a huge responsibility for not only our patients and our communities, but also for our organisation to really immerse myself into the AI learning technology side of things. And what we do know is that it's moving at a pace faster than the human can actually accept and absorb. But that's okay because you're starting to think about it. And that's exactly what MoleMap is doing. We're starting to think about our front-end clinical AI is an extremely complicated piece of equipment that is actually supporting us from a diagnostic perspective. And it's amazing. And we're continuously evolving that. We're getting confident year by year, day by day with Kahu AI. The next stage for MoleMap is really understanding, well, what is the agentic AI solutions that we can incorporate from a support office perspective? We're a scalable business model. We're scaling extremely fast. We know that AI solutions can help us faster and move at a more rapid rate than some human elements can. For example, we've only just really recently introduced Molly, which is Molly sits in our SDR component. She's an AI agent. She's a voice agent that actively contacts our corporate sales potentials and converts them into warm leads. And then we have our amazing team that then comes in and closes the deal. Mm. So these are the components where we've been able to really scale more broadly. And Molly can talk to 1,000 customers a day, where a human can only talk to up to 5 customers a day. So these are the benefits that we're actually seeing when we're incorporating agentic AI solutions into our back-end support office. I strongly recommend that other CEOs should be doing the same.
And I'm curious to know one point that you just touched on was the trust and the patient care. And being in the industry that you are, there is a lot of due diligence around ensuring that you are doing the right thing by your patients. And I know that that's something that's very important to you, as you've spoken about. How have you balanced that pace of innovation, the speed of innovation, with the due diligence and with taking that time to make sure that the patient care is still of utmost importance?
Yeah. I look at that as two streams. So we're constantly valuing and surveying our patients, and that feedback is helping us shape Kahu AI and how that is incorporated into our clinical workflows. The other part of it is empathy will never go. Humans require, in particular within healthcare, they require a conversation, education. What we do know is that the AI can't tell us how long the lesion's been there for. Does it raise? Does it get itchy when you're out in the sun? Has it changed shape? So we know that the AI can't ask those questions. And that's where the human in the loop comes into play. And we find that that balance is working exceptionally well. The customers are feeling very confident and trusting that we have our clinicians there, but they're also getting a validation from Kahu AI. And then, of course, our dermatologists are ultimately diagnosing that specific lesion.
So it's the combination of AI with the human element that ensures that you've got all of those bases covered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Today, you cannot have just AI technology. In healthcare in particular, I do feel, in my opinion, that you will always have to have that expert human clinician to be able to support the AI technology and to give patients the confidence.
And when you think about how this is being worked through in MolMap, how have you been able to lead the team to be on that AI journey with you? Because one of the things that you touched on was AI was in the closet when you came into the organization. And this is a big a change management piece from a people perspective as well, to get on board with the idea of AI. So how have you really led that from a people and a cultural perspective?
Execution is everything. If you can't execute on an idea, then what is your idea? Your idea is worth nothing. It was a combination of leading the way, being enthusiastic and passionate about why we were introducing Kahu AI into our clinical workflows, reassuring our clinicians that it wasn't there to replace them, but to support them. We compiled a project team to be able to effectively deliver and execute and roll out Kahu AI. I think the most successful thing that happened out of this was that I appointed a champion, and that champion was a frontline clinical worker who was an amazing individual that essentially went to every single clinic and educated them into the reasons why we were incorporating Kahu AI into our clinical workflows and how it was going to benefit the patient and how it would benefit them. And then we constantly iterated. So once we rolled it out, our AI champion was in there on a monthly, 3-monthly basis to ensure that we were meeting the needs of the clinician, but also that Kahu AI, from a governance perspective and a responsibility point of view, was not acting as a biased decision maker. And we have mechanisms in the background to ensure that. We conduct regular audits to ensure that there's non-bias within the views of what we do. And it's actually changed the way that we deliver patient care. Our nurses are asking questions first before getting the technology to apply over the lesion, which is enabling them to understand the patient a lot better.
I love that approach of really explaining to your people why, and that reassurance piece, I think, is so key in any change management process, because when we don't understand the why, then that's when we get a lot more resistance around the change. I'm sure, though, there was some kind of resistance still. Could you speak to when there were those points of resistance, and particularly for other CEOs and leaders that would be listening to this that are potentially going down a similar journey themselves, but are finding that they are challenged by employee resistance or team member resistance or the fear of their roles being replaced? Is it that communication and reassurance piece, or was there anything else that you could advise other CEOs that are thinking of going down a similar road?
Yeah, look, amazingly for MolMap, the execution and the rollout went extremely well. There wasn't resistance at all from our frontline registered nurses. If anything, there was more resistance from our specialist dermatologists who thought that it was going to replace their role as clinicians. I think it goes back to my ground roots and being a frontline worker and wanting and needing information was something that I led quite closely. I leaned in and ensured that our teams were being communicated and transparently and authentically along the journey. What was quickly evident for our registered nurses was exactly what I told you, is that the AI can't ask the patient how long that lesion's been there for. Does it raise when it's in the sun? Is it itchy? So immediately our nurses had realised that this won't replace us. It'll actually help us determine clinical diagnostics for our dermatologists to diagnose. From a dermatologist perspective, it was about bringing them along the journey. They're specialists, rightly so. They have gone to university for many years to attain a specialty degree. It was about explaining to them how do they embrace the technology that can complement their diagnosis and their skills. And in fact, we've seen greater accuracy within lesion diagnostics and monitoring, lesser excision rates because we don't want unnecessary excisions. And our dermatologists have embraced this piece of technology and they are embracing it. So look, there are challenges and you may get some hiccups along the way, but I think you really need to stay true to your goal. And when you really have a very clear priority and a very clear focus, you need to fully immerse yourself into this project. And along the way, you need to be there and ensure that you are communicating effectively to all stakeholders within the organisation to ensure that this is going to be a success.
One of the things that I've also read about in your philosophy and your principles is that leaders really need to get in the trenches, but also know when to step back and actually lead. So I'm curious to know, how have you been able to personally manage and balance that throughout your own career and now particularly in the position of CEO?
It takes a great deal of discipline and skill to be able to do that. And that is through years of accumulation of leading organisations. My philosophy has always been, Michelle, you can't just be good at one thing, especially within this dynamic environment that we're in. And what does that mean and how does that translate into your actions? And that is having to get into the trenches and understand in detail what are the elements that we're focusing on and how are we translating them into outputs to ultimately provide the best patient care. Bringing yourself out is extremely important because once you're in those trenches and you can't get yourself out, how are you leading a team? So I make a conscious effort on a quarterly basis. I'm out there on the front line. I'm getting into the trenches. I'm listening and understanding, and I'm gaining ideas from front lines. They are the closest individuals to our customers. And then I come back and I bring myself back out again and I start to lead and we start to have meaningful conversations around what we've learned from the front line. I think that has been quite pivotal in the success of my leadership, is the fact that leading in such a dynamic environment post-COVID, yes, it was some years ago, but we're still not out of the woods yet. We're living in a high inflationary environment. It's very dynamic. We have had to pivot multiple times, and it's about having that confidence and resilience and that intuition to understand. But equally, it's about, because I actually understand the whole ecosystem of this business, which is giving me the confidence to say that we can pivot. I feel if there's a message out there to any CEO, do not linear think. Think more broadly. And if you can't think more broadly, then get yourself into the trenches and sit with your departments to understand fully and deeply how these initiatives are becoming successful and how can we push this business forward and push those boundaries with the foundations that we currently have.
One theme that keeps coming through for me throughout this conversation, it's this balance or this duality between both courage and care. It's being able to lead with the confidence and conviction whilst also remaining so caring towards your team, to the people around you, to your patients. How have you personally been able to find some sort of way to balance all of that and I suppose be a representative of what that possibility looks like from a leadership perspective?
Vulnerability, empathy and care. It really comes down to the ground roots and where I've come from, understanding and working alongside frontline workers, but also traversing and elevating myself throughout every area of leadership within an organisation. And I do think it's important that you do lead with authenticity. And when I say authenticity, it's about showing people that you care, showing people that you have a level of vulnerability and they're not afraid to see Michelle as a human. And that goes such a long way that it does then translate to, Michelle, what can we help you do to deliver the best possible patient outcomes? That just comes naturally. I think the element of being a leader from a strategic point of view and also working with a team that elevates me and elevates our frontline is extremely important. I also think that you can't be everywhere at once. So when you focus on a priority, focus on that priority and identify that priority very carefully. And then once you have, then you fully lean into that priority. And then I think that really helps me, I won't say compartmentalize myself, but it really does help me elevate and show the full Michelle Aquilina versus the strategic side of Michelle or the operational side of Michelle or the innovative side of Michelle or the empathetic side. It's about how am I blending those all in together.
And what I really got from that as you were sharing is that it's bringing all parts of you forward as well. And I think that sometimes in a professional setting or in an organizational setting, we're taught, don't be too much, don't be too vulnerable, don't share that more human side of you. But what you're really saying is that it's all of you, including leading with that vulnerability, that makes it work and makes it so powerful.
It really does. And back many years ago, I was actually afraid to show that vulnerability, working your way up through the ranks in leadership and in particular in healthcare. You never showed vulnerability. You were a strong leader and you had to be that leader. But there are a couple of elements during my career and my time, and COVID-19 actually being one of them. And I thought to myself, Michelle, you know what? Just show your true self. And there was a time when someone asked me a question, what has been the most impactful moment within MoleMap a few years ago? It was a devastating moment when a 17-year-old boy had passed away from melanoma. And I started crying through that interview. And I thought I couldn't help myself. I couldn't contain myself. And I was so embarrassed, but I shouldn't have been. And then I came back and reflected on that moment. And I got a phone call a couple of days later and they said, Michelle, do you mind if we run with this? Because it's really raw and authentic. And it was a very big moment for me because Michelle never showed that side of herself. And I was extremely nervous. And I said, you need to give me 24 hours to think about this. And I went, okay. Within 24 hours, I said, yes, you can. And it was the most responsive interview that I had ever had. And that clearly demonstrated that people want to see the authentic side of yourself, that vulnerability, because that shows that you genuinely care and you're passionate about what you're trying to deliver.
And I think it's such a testament to being willing and, again, being courageous enough to lead with that vulnerability. When you think about your legacy as a leader, what is the impact you really want to make?
Yeah, I would love to be known as an inspirational leader, someone who has come from the front lines and is now the CEO of a global leading organization. A message to anyone that's thinking that if they are starting at the front line and they think that that's too far removed for them, it's actually not, because that's where Michelle Aquilina started. And that's why I have been so successful in the CEO roles that I've actually attained.
It's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
Michelle, we love to end all of our interviews here at CEO Behind the Scenes with a rapid fire round. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is one habit you refuse to compromise on no matter how busy you get?
I always will pick up the phone and I'm always accessible. So I have a lot of frontline workers that will call me and ask me some questions or feel that they would like just to have a conversation. That is something that I will never, ever give up.
Question 2, what is the best piece of business advice that you actually use?
Be courageous, bold, and authentic.
Question 3, what is the app that you can't live without?
Ooh. Instagram.
I love the honesty. That's awesome. And question 4, if you weren't leading MolMap, what would you be doing?
I would be participating in the High Rocks World Global Challenges.
Oh, wow. That is impressive. Michelle, I have so loved our conversation, and your story really is one of resilience, of grit, of courage, of humility, of care, but also the boldness and audacity to be able to really lead in such an innovative way. So it's no doubt that you are leaving an incredible impact with the work that you're doing, and I'm very excited to continue to learn more.
Thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much to all of our listeners for being here as well. If you enjoyed this episode, then please make sure to subscribe, rate and review the podcast, and also share this episode with someone in your community or network that you believe would really value and benefit from listening to Michelle's incredible insights today. So thank you so much for listening, and bye for now.